Hey, Mike Palmer here. Thanks again for listening. This takes us back to our second of four episodes on the ESPN docuseries The Last Dance, which covers the 1998 season of the Chicago Bulls and their domination of 1990s basketball. Lots to draw from here. Tarlin and I are beginning to ground into form. With that, let's throw to the theme music brought to you by our very own Ken Florence. Hope you enjoy. Welcome back to Running It Back, the Last Dance Breakdown Show. Mike Palmer here, joined by Tarlin Ray. Tarlin, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm a little sad. We are about to talk about episodes 5 and 6, which means The Last Dance is almost over. We only have 4 more episodes.
Yeah, this is the hump day episode. This is the middle piece of a 5-parter.
Welcome to Wednesday.
Welcome to Wednesday of The Last Dance. Although it's only our second breakdown show, and it's going to finish with a bang, right? So spoiler alert, there's some great episodes coming where they're just going to try to tie it all together. But a lot going on. Episode 5 and episode 6. This is where the saga of the Dream Team comes into play. It's where Jordan's shoe deals come in, his relationship with Kobe, his relationship with the Knicks, Charles Barkley and the Phoenix Suns super team that wasn't. Lots of stuff going on in both of these episodes and lots of lessons to be learned, right? So we're watching it for the pure entertainment value, but then we're also trying to come away as better people with some illustrative lessons. Tarlin, I know some of this stuff resonated with you. You're a Lakers fan.
Yeah, you got to start with the Kobe moment.
Episode 5 starts with Kobe. Thoughts?
Amazing. Really hard to see Kobe on screen, obviously after his untimely death. I think a lot of Laker fans, it was great just to see him back as an 18, 19-year-old trying to make a name in the league, an early all-star, and willing to not wait his turn to have his place among the pantheons of the greats out there, but to go after it as quickly as possible. But my main takeaway, we grew up thinking that Kobe was trying to just mimic all of Michael Jordan, the way he walked, the way he chewed gum, a little bit of swagger, his shots. And at the end of the day, he wasn't doing that because he wasn't trying to be himself. He was doing that because he was trying to emulate someone he thought was the greatest of all time.
Yep.
And so what stuck with me was Kobe, who's an outsized talent, was if anyone wants to learn about what it takes to be a great mentee and seek out a mentor, he is a classic case of someone who showed some desire. You got Jordan at the height of his power, 35-year-old, he's 18-year-old. And he did everything he could to make sure he could learn from Michael.
Yeah.
From studying him, badgering him to try to get his phone number, and finally getting Michael to relent to give him his phone number, texting him at all hours, asking him in game to show him some footwork. So it shows that people don't do this alone. The greats, you don't just come out of the womb and you figure it all out. The ones who are truly great ask for help. The ones who are truly great get help, because to be a great mentee, you have to show up. You have to be willing to put in the work, and you ask great questions and show desires. Mentors that are always out there willing to help. So I loved that mentor-mentee relationship that no one knew. Yeah. So as the world is comparing Kobe to Jordan, the two of them didn't care, because Kobe was trying to steal those moves from Jordan so he could be great himself. So it was awesome.
Yeah. And it's a nice finishing point on Jordan's eulogy for Kobe, which was the new Crying Jordan meme, was Michael kind of reclaiming some of his public stature by being graceful and genuine and authentic during Kobe's eulogy, after it really starting to surface the relationship that he had with Kobe, which many of us didn't really realize. And then to see that more fully fleshed out in The Last Dance, I think made it real. It is interesting, though, to your point, I agree 100% that it's so critical to be able to ask for help and then not to be shy about asking for more help, especially when you find someone who you know will be a willing partner. I think it is interesting that, to the best of my knowledge, they're not showing Jordan finding that, aside from maybe Phil. Like, Phil kind of let him be him, and Doug Collins let him be him. But like the relationship that Jordan established with Kobe, you didn't get the sense that he really was looking to someone. He saw Bird and Magic ahead of him, but it's not like they were mentoring him. They were his rivals. So it is interesting that Kobe was able to benefit from Jordan as a mentor, whereas Jordan didn't seem to have that as much. At least I haven't seen that thus far. And
I totally agree. Yeah. I think that's part of it. You mentioned little Phil. He may not be, Phil played back in the day, but I truly do think Phil was that for Michael. Mm-hmm. It may be part of the reason that when we're at the Last Dance, he said he wouldn't play for another coach.
Right. Right.
Because he was the guy that helped. We've talked about in the last episode, Jordan was willing to change, was willing to take the ball out of his hands, and you got someone that was willing to push and prod him in a new and unique way.
Yeah.
Did not have that on the court.
Right.
He was just trying to rip people's throats out.
He's such a competitor. And that was the other component. So a lot to be learned from the Kobe story. It's nice to see the relationship there. We were talking a little bit in the setup to Jordan, and his maniacal competitiveness certainly comes through here, but there was enough distance, the 17 years you were talking about, his junior and Kobe, there was enough distance that Jordan was at a point in his career where he could see the next generation's version of himself in Kobe, and he was actually willing to be a mentor to Kobe in a way that he wouldn't really be able to be that type of a mentor to his contemporaries. So like he wasn't mentoring Karl Malone or Clyde Drexler or Charles Barkley in the way that he was mentoring Kobe. So that is definitely a window into Jordan as the alpha competitor, right? I mean, that's really, except if you're actually gambling with him, in which case he may be a little bit more of a beta. But thoughts on the competitive aspect, because that comes up pretty quickly into this show as well. And then maybe as we segue, we can say on Kobe as long as you like, because I want to respect your, he was a big deal to you. Lakers are a big deal to you. But I think it's interesting to think about it as a window into Jordan, where he reached a point where he was ready to give back, and then he saw the rising talent in Kobe as enough of a V2 of Jordan that he could really give some of his secrets away, because he didn't really the idea of them playing each other one-on-one in a fair match, it was already past Jordan's prime by the time Kobe was really ready.
100%. But remember, in '98, he's about to go win his last championship. Mm-hmm. He is still going to compete with him on the court, but no one is propping him up as that guy that could be the next Jordan or a Drexler or
right.
There's nothing in the paper yet for him to take it as a slight to try to crush him.
Right.
One of the things you're touching on is his competitive drive, and that, people have addicted personalities. That is his addiction. Mm-hmm. He is addicted. He gets energy, he gets juice out of competition. We saw it. We talked about it in the setup. Just the moment with the security guards playing just that simple game, quarters against the wall.
Yeah.
And the one guard who takes Jordan for $20, he is now my favorite guy of all time.
Yeah, yeah. But he's the only guard who took Jordan's money.
There you go. But it is amazing to think, whether it's cards, quarters, golf, he just needed to feel like he was always in the arena and trying to best someone.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming ahead too, but even switching over to baseball, which I think we're going to see more in the last few seasons, is the same idea. It was like there are reasons why it was clear that he had to leave basketball and we'll get into that a little bit later on, but like the idea that he was like, okay, what's another thing that I could do to show that I can compete on any level? There was even talk in the early days, it went away pretty fast, that maybe he goes pro as a golfer later on. That was talk from him mainly. I mean, I'm not saying there was a lot of like reason.
They'll only be allowed if you can smoke a cigar on the course. The other thing is, do we really need to see a lot of baseball with swinging and missing? I mean,
right. Well, we'll cut that. I'm assuming that'll be episodes 7 and 8.
Hopefully it's a little flashback. Hey, he played baseball.
But the competitive drive is crazy. And that brings me to the other aspect of, I think it was episode 5, when they start talking about the dream team. And that was really where, among the most competitive basketball players, the most talented and competitive basketball players in the world, they come together for Team USA. Us sending amateurs to the Olympics to lose was no longer going to be something that Team USA was going to allow. So 1992, we're sending pros. We're assembling the greatest team that's ever been put together. How that team comes together, who's in, who's out is part of this. And how Jordan emerged out of that forge of those practices as the undisputed alpha of alphas.
Undisputed heavyweight champ.
Yeah. So thoughts on the whole dream team, because that's also where Toni Kukoc comes in, right? So you were signaling last time Tony's story is going to come back. So let's pivot into the dream team part of the story.
Dream team is awesome. Remember, we are probably only a year after Magic. I still remember where I was when he announced that he had HIV.
Yep.
Just come out of practice myself in high school. So he is now with that team. Isaiah is the biggest snub. You could go and say Shaq was a snub because he was so dominant coming out of college, but
also because they took Leitner.
But Duke was the team, America's team. Yeah. Leitner was the top player on Duke. So hard to quibble with that. He was a winner. Sure. Right. And you needed someone who would stand in the corner and not make waves.
You needed your 90210 character. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You need Luke Perry was there.
You need the sideburns. Yeah, exactly.
Look a little old for high school. Yeah. But hey, why don't you hang out for a little while? So amazing for Jordan to hit that conversation on, which is, did you have anything to do with Isaiah not making the team?
Yeah.
When he's asked to join the team, and his question is who's going to be on the team, and Rod Thorne infers that he's like, oh, don't worry, that guy's like be on the team. That seems like a squishy conversation. But two things that he did say, which I think Jordan doesn't hand out a lot of accolades. One, outside of Magic, he thought Isaiah was the second best point guard that he's played against. That says a lot.
Yeah.
Does he hate him? Yes. But he still thought he was the second best point guard.
Right. The
second piece with Isaiah, because he thought there's such a bond amongst the Dream Teamers, was that Isaiah would have been, he didn't use these words, but basically what he's intimating, would have been a bad cultural fit.
Yeah.
And so I took this away because sports, I think, leads you learn a lot from sports. But if you look at being in business, working, if you're joining a new company, you're an employer,
being a collaborator, right? Yeah.
Collaborator. Being an unbelievable star, but being a bad cultural fit is always awful for your organization. And that's basically what Jordan was saying. So I get that. I get if there's animosity weaving not only with Jordan, but Pippen and Magic. There's just a lot of guys. Bird, couldn't stand them.
Right.
Bird and Mullen were they weren't necessarily in their prime, but you'd rather take them because you knew there'd be a great cultural fit. So I thought that was really telling. And I guess the last piece on the dream team was I really wish we televised the Monte Carlo practices.
Oh my God.
So speaking of slights, most people know Magic and Barkley were on the same team. Jordan was another team. Magic and Barkley were up at least 9 on their way to really blowing out Jordan's squad. And at some point, Magic said, if you don't watch out, if you don't turn it Air Jordan, we're going to blow you out. And Magic and others said they've never seen someone flip a switch, dominate
the rest
of that practice, at which point they all board the bus at the end of practice and everyone's silent. And I think it was Magic said, well, I guess we now know who is king.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's a ton of respect, not only with you think you go to Olympics, you sort of just phone it in, but to have these guys competing so hard just to go to Olympics, to play against it was amazing to see.
Not to mention what he was doing at the tables in Monte Carlo the night before, whole other conversation, also interesting. And then to have them mic'd up for that, the trash that must have been talked. Because when I play, we play basketball, you were a better basketball player. I've already conceded that, arguably. It's a pretty simple argument. You're better basketball than me. I was pretty good at running my mouth, though. I could talk. And I didn't mind having the conversation. And what I love about a lot of these players, Jordan included, they could talk. Bird was notorious trash talker. Magic didn't mind talking. Barkley, forget about it. Barkley still can't stop talking. He hasn't played in 20 years. He's still a brilliant with running his mouth. And the idea that there are players who either get better when they talk or get worse. And there are people who get better when you talk or get worse. And Jordan was like, he's the type of guy, just don't talk to him. Whatever you do, don't wake that guy up. If he's asleep, don't poke the bear. Don't be like, hey, I noticed you're having a bad game, Michael. Bad decision. So
ranking guys who did the most talking the least, here's the guy who didn't say a word.
Right.
John Stockton.
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of need it.
David Robinson.
Yeah.
Just silent.
Right. Patrick, we'll talk Knicks a little bit in a second. Patrick could talk a little bit. Patrick, he kept it mostly to himself because Patrick he would just look angry and he would physically intimidate you because he was so huge. But he had a good sense of humor. He also, the chemistry point that you're making about Isaiah was pretty good too, I think, in that these were amazing players who still were able to unite and play together. And it reminds me of Adam Grant's book, Give and Take, which same thing around team chemistry, where there are givers and there are takers. And then there are matchers, people, quid pro quo. You give me something, I'll give you something. Like, we'll figure out how to barter together and sort of form a team together. But the idea that, at least at that level, Isaiah would not have blended with all of them were the alphas on their team, but they still were able to come together and form this team dynamic that was really transformational, and that Jordan was the alpha among alphas is really incredible. The flip side is what Isaiah and Laimbeer and Mahorn in particular were able to do, and Rodman had a little bit of this in his origin story, is to really not care what anybody else thinks. So like they and the fact that he got frozen out, you could tell it still hurts Isaiah that he got frozen out, but he still doesn't apologize really for walking off the way they walked off, because the Celtics walked off the same way for the Pistons. So it's tough to get behind Isaiah 100%, but if you actually think about where he's coming from, there is a moral consistency to how he operated, which basically makes you have to buy into the bad boys. And for two-time champions, that team is not really loved much.
Not really loved and not really talented. Yeah. You have Rodman in the early days.
Yeah.
You still have Dumars. But in terms of all-world talent, I mean, Laimbeer was lunch pail, hard hat, John Sally, Mahorn. I mean, these guys weren't dunking. They weren't jumping out of the gym.
Yeah.
They were credit card leapers. They would bully you. It's sort of under the ribs that you can't see. And they just got the job. They're the fundamental team with Isaiah with the little flash.
Yeah.
Microwave Vinny could hit some jumpers, but there was a lot of flash that. They were they were good coached, Chuck Daly, and go.
Good team basketball too, which also, I'm not an Isaiah apologist to an extreme, but like the fact that he could get that team together to perform that way does show that he's not exclusively bad chemistry. He was part of one of the all-time great chemistry teams in terms of like swinging above their weight. The fact that
that's if you think he was the true leader. I mean, he was a point guard, but it was a Dumars, was it Laimbeer?
Or a combination. And Dumars
Isaiah walked off the court because Laimbeer said, "We're going to do this."
It's true.
Who wore the C?
For sure, but you can't argue that the Pistons would have won the two championships without Isaiah, whether he was the leader or not. Like,
I had Isaiah poster on my wall.
Yeah. Did you have it the shorts too, or no?
Oh, it's Kevin Johnson, Isaiah.
Yeah.
Barkley.
Yeah.
What do you mean the shorts? They're all the shorts.
The other thing, real quick, as we move on though, but when you were mentioning the Magic, it's sort of like flashbulb memory for me when Magic, the press conference, when he came out as HIV positive. For me, when I heard the tragic news about Kobe, that was the closest thing to me taking me back to when I first heard that Magic had HIV, because at the time, that sounded like a death sentence.
100%.
And now, 30 years later, Magic is thriving. Unbelievable stuff. So last thing on the dream team, though, that was where the Toni Kukoc narrative comes in.
Kukoc.
Lots to learn on the Kukoc side of the house. So quick thoughts on Toni.
Love when you so Jordan is one of the few. So in the episode, always seems like he doesn't care. He's sitting in his chair,
Yeah,
drinking something, little cigar. Panda Kukoc, he's got the same vibe.
Yeah.
The best part about it, because all we read in the paper leading up to this game was how much Jordan and Pippen hated Kukoc. They were going to try to take him out because Krause loved Kukoc. Kukoc didn't even know.
Right.
So in the first game leading up to the gold medal round, he got destroyed. I mean, Pippen and Jordan picking up Kukoc full court.
Right.
Telling the guys no one has Toni but us.
Right.
And if Jordan and Pippen were, and I'm not going to even look it up, I'm 100% sure this is right. At some point, they were both first-team All-NBA, and I think they were first-team All-NBA coming out of that season.
Yeah. Maybe also, I think they both were All-NBA defense.
That's what I meant, All-NBA defense. That's right.
Yeah.
So, Kukoc doesn't have a good game.
Right.
But I was talking to a buddy after that, and he said, listen, the reason Kukoc came back in the gold medal game and had 16 points, 6 assists, played a good game, this is a guy who's living in a war-torn area.
Yeah.
He was dodging bullets.
Right.
So to be on a basketball court and have a couple of guys being a little physical with him, he's like, okay. So I didn't realize they're going to come out that hard. So he just adjusted. So it says a lot about Toni. Didn't back down. To be able to then go and join a star-studded team like the Bulls and play with Jordan says a lot about him.
Yeah.
So I appreciate I didn't see that part of Toni.
Yeah.
I love USA was destroying him because we built up Toni to be this evil monster. But I love seeing that backstory.
Yeah.
How, coming up for it, your upbringing is everything. And he had a different perspective. Like playing basketball was probably just a safe haven. And there's nothing bad that can happen on the basketball court.
Right.
And when that can intimidate him, it's a lot different than being at war.
Yeah.
So,
and it's a reminder that Jordan could motivate himself by singling an enemy out and destroying them. And whether it was Toni Kukoc or Jerry Krause or Isaiah, the list continues to go on and on. There was always somebody who there's a chip on his shoulder going all the way back to getting cut as a sophomore. There was always some reason for him to work harder, for him to drive that competitive instinct within him. And he could get his team to buy into that as well. We were saying when we were setting up here too, like having Jerry Krause as his fallback foil, the guy who he could be motivated by, is very much about what drives Michael to be the best. He's also a bit of a bully. Let's be real about it too. So like choosing Toni Kukoc, who was the second best player on Croatia? Not sure, but the fact that Scotty and Michael together could shut down the best player on the other team is a little bit of, it's very much the way pickup basketball works, where if the team is just so much better than the other side, it's easy to send a message to the best player on the other team. So there is a little bit of the bully in Michael, but also there's something to be learned around how he was able to motivate himself and motivate his teammates. I'll also say these shows, these are kind of the haterade shows in the series as well. There is a lot of knocking at Michael. And I've gotten that as I've talked to people about this show too. Like there are people who refuse to watch it, which I was surprised to hear. There are still folks who have Jordan hatred from back in the day. And I was surprised to hear that. I kind of want to get some of the Jordan haters on the show because, a lot of folks don't like, the Republicans buy sneakers too.
Buy sneakers too, yep.
The gambling, the dubious exit, which again, we'll get into, I think, next shows. But there are people who still conspiracy theories abound about Jordan. And folks do like to knock him because of the faults, punch Will Purdue, ultra competitive, gambling problem, went to Atlantic City with his dad, was into selling shoes more than taking a political stand. All those criticisms, I'm glad that they're incorporated into the documentary because it could have been more of a fluff piece about how amazing Jordan was. I think you start to see more of the full human in this show than maybe I was expecting. And I would encourage those of you who have been drinking deep of the Jordan haterade, watch a couple of these episodes. I'd say watch episode 5, especially, where there's both Jordan hate, but there's also his cultural influence around shoe culture and hip hop and what it meant to be cool in the 80s into the 90s. It's easy to forget all that, and it's easy to forget how much that changed the world that we live in today. The way people think about sneakers, the way people think about hip hop culture. Spike Lee may never have been Spike Lee if it weren't for Mars Blackman.
Gotta be the shoes.
It's got to be the shoes. Any thoughts on sneaker culture? Because we haven't had a chance to get into that.
Well, before we hit sneaker culture, I think one of the things, especially episode 5, it just showed what Jordan cared about. And so people who hate Jordan are then expecting Jordan to do certain things or care about the things that they think are important.
Yeah.
And he was a basketball player. And that was number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so if he was not politically active. He, at one point, should have listened to his mom. We should talk about Jordan's mom as we lead up to Mother's Day when we get into sneaker culture. But Jordan was who he was, and people celebrated him for being able to fly to do the unbelievable feats he could do on the basketball court.
Yeah.
At some point, Charles Barkley is quoted as saying, "I am not your role model."
Right.
And he was speaking truth well before other people. Like, I'm a basketball player. I'm literally like a little bit of a superhero because of that. But if you want the rest of my life to piece together neatly to fit what you hope this perfect individual will be, then you're looking in the wrong place. In terms of sneaker culture, shout out to moms, because no one knows. I mean, the fact that just looking back at old commercials, forgot that Converse dominated and had all the top players.
Jordan,
Mark Aguirre, and
Bird Magic.
They're one of the best commercials ever. Then Reebok was sort of there, but not there.
Yeah.
And the fact that Jordan loved Adidas, but they just couldn't afford to really promote Jordan. And at Nike, a running shoe company.
Right.
And A, Jordan picked to go with the Nike running shoe company, and then B, Jordan's being repped by David Falk, who represented tennis players, Arthur Ashe, Connors. The fact that Jordan never wanted to go to Nike to fly to Beaverton and get pitched, and his mom was the one that forced him to go, is crazy.
Right.
Then for him to sign a deal which is 2 times more than any other shoe deal out there.
Right.
And then for them to project to sell $3 million of shoes in their first year and they sell $126 million.
Oh my God.
It's over.
Yeah.
And Jordan shoes, it just became, I still remember Do the Right Thing, where the guy in the bird shirt steps on his shoes. But it just exploded. So you talk about sneaker culture. Jordan was the first, that icon in Nike. I still remember Iverson signing with Reebok.
Yeah.
And I bet on Reebok because I thought Iverson, which he was a totally coming from a totally background.
When they do an Iverson docuseries, we'll run it back then.
Yeah, we'll run it back. The problem is those shoes sucked. The answer 2, they just sucked. So anyways, I think people forget the impact that Jordan has, and Jordan, the reason he is worth billions of dollars and can own the Bobcats is because of the Jordan brand and shoes. It all comes. It's got to be the shoes. Yeah, it's about the shoes.
Well, and it does speak to his genius, which is part of what he gets knocked for, is in terms of how he could parlay his brand into endorsements. No one ever did it as well as him. Even if you think Be Like Mike, which was part of what drove a lot of the vitriol towards him, because when people started to say, it's like when you fly too close to the sun, it's not just that you burn your wings, it's that people start shooting slingshots at you. Like, people want to bring you back down. But like the idea that what got him up there was single-minded focus on, I'm going to be the best basketball player ever, and I will look out for my commercial interests and my brand, because that is going to be as much how I earn as basketball is. It's easy to knock that as, mercenary and too focused on your own financial interests. But had he not done that, the upside of being LeBron James would never have been as great as it is. After Muhammad Ali, who sort of created the celebrity athlete culture, no one really got to this next level until Jordan. And then since Jordan, you know, we talked a little bit, maybe Tiger got there. LeBron is arguably there now, but he sort of reinvented what you could do as a brand, as an endorser. And he was very consciously making a choice to do that, even over standing up for social causes, which is now becoming more how LeBron is defining himself. So there is a lot of who is the GOAT and a lot of revisionist history now around like what LeBron is able to do versus what Michael actually did. I think it's easy to lose sight of the fact that Michael created a whole new quantum level of celebrity and media presence that people have only been able to replicate. Nobody has really gone, I don't think you can go further than that. You know?
And imagine you talk about protecting the brands you're associated with. Just go back to the Olympics when he refused to walk out in the Reebok sweatsuit and he covered the Reebok brand with the American flag.
Stylishly draped it. I mean,
draped over shoulder. But that's, I mean, whether it's McDonald's, Gatorade, and I know you want to sing the song.
Yeah. He is me. Yeah.
Everyone knows that. And
boom,
Nike.
Boom, boom. Yeah.
protect the brand. You know, it's interesting. You had to be, and Muhammad Ali was different. He wasn't, you know, there weren't massive endorsements behind him. He was just a celebrity athlete. Jordan was tiptoeing because he didn't know what the reaction would be to him. Probably not that it was in his mind. That probably wasn't thinking about, but be more socially active. Now brands actually celebrate that, whether you look at the Kaepernicks of the world or supporting the Miami Heat players who wore hoodies out in support of Trayvon Martin. So it's a different era, but to your point, no one from 84 on can build a brand associated with a major shoe company where they have massive ownership and it just continues to drive outsized revenue for him, even though he hasn't laced it up since 01.
Yeah. And then the success of the 90s in terms of the NBA success, the people who made all this money on endorsements, they were all riding the Dream Team was another great marketing effort for the NBA to go global. So like it's all really some canny business vision that Jordan, he was a savant in terms of managing his own brand, arguably at the expense of being politically active in the way that we would want him to be in a modern day. But he was also singularly focused on being the best basketball player ever. Anything that would get in the way of either his commercial interests or his ability to be the best basketball player ever would take a back seat. And it actually gets a little sad, you know, like when he's lying on the couch in the hotel room, basically trapped by his own celebrity, it is setting the table for him to leave. And I know that'll be coming in the subsequent episodes. But you do get a little bit of a window into the stress that he was under and how it was hard to be that big a personality. And I just think there's some life lessons to learn from there. For me, that's why I'm choosing not to be a transcendent celebrity.
Right,
you know, like,
of course.
Because like, you know, I thought about it and I've decided to maybe take a back seat.
You mentioned, so interesting, you started talking about no one can sort of replicate what Jordan did. He had sort of outsized influence on the NBA. His little brother, though, if you think about it, and God rest his soul, Kobe was one of the first to go to China and spend a lot of time in China. And so that was Dream Team, created a lot of international interests. I'm a diehard NBA draft. Used to know the top 60 players because they were all in college basketball. And you start to see the flow of who's that guy? Who's that? Who are these people? And you're like trying to figure out who the international players are.
Yeah.
I think Kobe was a little transcendent there. And then you have guys like Dwayne Wade, who signed not with Nike, not with Adidas, not with Reebok, but signed with Li-Ning, a Chinese shoe company. And when he's there, it is like it is the biggest thing ever.
Yeah,
so you have guys that are taking pieces of the playbook. There's only
Mhm.
so much you can get to be the next Nike shoe guy. Only
Right.
so much Durant can get.
Right.
Only so much Westbrook can get. So
Right.
you got to start branching out and looking at new frontiers. Take a little risk.
Yeah.
A little bit of risk, big markets, and take some bets. And it takes time and energy. And Kobe used to go there all the time, and Dwayne does that now as well.
Mhm. And Jordan did flip it to be the players really having the power more so than even ownership, arguably, in the NBA, which is very different from, say, the NFL. So lot to credit him in terms of like the power of the transcendent player as really the driver of the growth of the NBA. It started with Magic and Bird, but really Jordan took it to another level. And then arguably Kobe picked up the torch in the early 2000s, maybe with a little help from Iverson and others. And then Tim Duncan.
Shaq, Tim Duncan.
Shaq, yeah. But then, and now LeBron and this next generation. So really interesting lineage there. We're coming up on time, but I got to say, Stark's dunk made it in, which is good, as did Charles Smith getting blocked repeatedly. So as a Knicks fan, I think I'm officially through the grieving process that I can watch.
Did you think you're going to win? Did you think you had a chance?
Yes. Don't get me started. Like, I understand the Knicks fans who are not watching because it's too hard. I understand. But, I mean, it's been 25 years. You can get over it. And I'm still waiting for when there's a documentary about the 90s Knicks. We'll definitely run it back on that, too, because, like, that needs its own documentary. I think
that's a bad watch.
Well, we are going to cover a little bit of OJ and John Starks and the relationship there. So that's the Knicks. Enough said on that. I want to get your thoughts on the Suns team. You mentioned Kevin Johnson earlier, and the one we're setting up, it's going right through the 93 series, which I still remember. And our boy John Paxson makes another appearance.
Big game, John.
But thoughts about that
team.
series.
I still remember that team. That team was pretty dominant.
Mm-hmm.
Thunder Dan, Danny Ainge. Looking at Danny Ainge now, looking at now versus then, he was a guy you hated. I hate him on the Celtics team. He's just a pain.
Remember, he bit Tree Rollins' ear, right? Yeah.
Kevin Johnson. I mean, that Suns team, I remember won 60 games, and they were dominating people fast. Mm-hmm. And Barkley was, I think he had, at times he had some weight issues, but he really slimmed down. He really was.
He was ready.
MVP that year.
Yeah.
So the fact that they lost that series, and when Barkley's going with triple doubles, it just takes an otherworldly focus from Jordan, and he carried that team on his back.
Him and John Paxson, yeah.
Paxson hit the last shot. So it's interesting. It's not like Jordan had to go through weak teams to get through and win these series. He's running up against. I mean, Portland had a pretty dominant team.
The Knicks.
The Knicks had a good team. The Suns had a dominant team. And for Barkley to say it was the first time ever in my life that someone was better than me on the basketball court.
Yeah.
That says a lot. Now, sad to know that Barkley and Jordan, who were the closest of friends, and Barkley went on air mostly and criticizing Jordan for his results as an owner, which look at his track record, it's awful. Mm-hmm. And since then they're no longer speaking. Yeah. But that was Barkley at a 6'5" power forward at his all-time superpower. Yeah. Still can't believe people couldn't stop him. Mm-hmm. Quick off his feet, could run the court. Mm-hmm. The early stretch power forward, hitting threes. Right. Wearing I don't remember why he was wearing the looked like the volleyball knee brace elbow pad.
Yeah.
Great series, but you realize that you think it happened easily, but the Bulls were down. They weren't always up in their series. Yeah. They had to claw back, which shows the B.J. Armstrong. I talked about in the first show, I thought the Ron Harper quote was my favorite. I think my favorite of the episodes 5 and 6 was B.J. Armstrong when he said Jordan was playing a different game. Everyone was playing the game, and he was just figuring out how to win. Yeah. And that says everything. Right. So, and you can see it taking over the end of games, shutting down their number one opponent. You'll see the end of the Jazz series in '98, him stripping Malone and then coming hit the last shot. So we'll see that later. Yeah. Shadowing. But so that's my take on the Suns. And
So a ton to learn, a ton still ahead of us, even though this was our hump day in terms of the 10 episodes. We're 6 in. There's also some rewatchable quality to this just to ramp up. We got to figure out if we're going to put a quiz together to figure out if our listeners are really paying attention. So, a lot going on. We've covered 60% of the 90s Bulls by this point. That's, 6 of 10 episodes. We got 40% left. We're going to talk about 20% of it next week. What are you expecting in episodes 7 and 8?
I expect a deep, long section on Luke Longley.
Yeah. You think you're, yeah.
Yeah. I do expect, and we talked about this in the setup, that they will touch on baseball, and I just hope they don't. It's painful to watch him scrape around on it. It's like watching Tim Tebow.
Well, yeah. And his comeback, though, is interesting because I didn't realize he wasn't gone that long, and he came back as number 45. I forgot about that whole thing.
That's a good call. I think that is like what it meant, like what was going on in his head to leave.
Yeah.
What got him to come back?
Yeah.
What was that like reorient yourself to basketball, which is, he didn't, he had to step slow.
Yeah.
Pippen had ascended. He was dominant.
Yeah.
And leading the team. So I'm curious if they're going to touch on any of that, him bring this team back. Because you remember what led the first three-peat was losing to the Pistons, the migraine game, and that set them up for that 3-year run. So I'm curious what sets them up for their next 3-year run.
Right.
New cast of characters, now with Ron Harper, now with Rodman, now with the aforementioned Luke Longley.
Yeah.
And now with Kerr playing the Paxson role.
Yeah.
What sets them up for this new run? Is it Phil?
Yeah.
What's the motivation? So that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And we'll be back breaking it down. Tarlin, Ray, thanks again for joining.
Always happy to be here.
Always happy to have you. And thanks again to our listeners. You're going to learn to love some running it back as we talk about The Last Dance. Thanks again for listening.